Listen, normally on a talk like this, I do a whole lot of discussion of pros and cons of cannabis policy, going through negative consequences and potential gains in order to persuade people who are not pro-legalization. I have a feeling those folks didn't show up tonight. And if that's the case, what I'd really like to do is talk about how to break through the idea that you don't make a difference. That I'm just one person, and so there's nothing I can do. Okay? In any domain in your life, but particularly in the domain of medical cannabis in the state of New York. Okay? If you have any questions about pot at all, and you're not eager to ask me, that's okay. I can hand around pencils and paper and stuff. And you can just write on here. Sound good? But what I want to point out is related to this slide behind me. On the top there we see a fighter jet, which if you have enough money, you can rent here in the United States. Far right upper there, what's that?
AK-47.
AK-47. When you're 12 years old in Missouri, you learn how to take a chisel and a metal wire and turn this into an automatic weapon. That's completely legal. On the bottom here, my friends from rentatank.com will rent you a tank that you can drive around. Far left on the bottom there, the plans for a burning laser are available on the internet, as are all the parts. And in the center, there are at least 4 states in the United States where you can legally own a grizzly bear. But you can't own this plant. Are you fucking kidding me? You can own a grizzly bear. You can't own this plant. Something has gone awry. Something is out of whack. It's time for things to change. How did Prohibition happen? What's our history on this? When I was in 7th grade, I thought marijuana had been illegal forever. Because, of course, I knew it makes you have kids with one eye in the middle of their heads. It leads to heroin addiction immediately. It causes aggression. It will make you mentally ill. Okay? In fact, how did this happen? Through increased public awareness, data-based persuasion, and informed legislative decisions. Let's take a look at each of these, shall we? My friend Otto von Bismarck put it best. Laws are like sausages. It is better not to see them being made. What goes into a sausage? A pig. Everything but the squeal. Okay. How are laws made? It is a gruesome, ridiculous process where a whole lot of good ideas get ground up with a lot of fat and thrown into an intestine. Who's this guy? First head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics.
Anslinger.
Harry Anslinger. Did wonderful work against organized crime, but also started the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, which is now the DEA, and things kind of went awry. Who are these folks?
Temperance Society?
You got it. The Temperance Society. The problem was, when the Temperance Society originally began, what did temperance mean? It meant be temperate about drinking. Don't drink too much. Right? But Americans have a disorder related to something called dichotomous thinking. And what's dichotomous thinking? Black and white. If it ain't one thing, it's the other. You're either evil or you're completely good. Right? So alcohol had to be evil. And hot babes like this said, lips that touch liquor shall not touch ours. Darn, a lot of folks were really disappointed. Right? Well, what happened with alcohol prohibition? It was a rousing success. And everybody said, oh, you know what? I don't need alcohol. This is great. I'm so glad we have a law to protect us. Okay, no, we created an outrageous underground market. The quality of alcohol dropped immensely. My grandma started making it in the tub. It's the last time my family had any money. And suddenly things really went awry. Well, at least we saw the errors of our ways. Increased public awareness. We had wonderful informative journals like this 35-cent paperback reefer stuff. The girl was the slave of marijuana. Yet was she wholly bad? This poor marijuana slave. Well, in fact, just how enslaving is marijuana? And some folks sat through this lecture today already. But my student Bob Gore and I did a little study. 700 mental health professionals rated the addictive potential, the propensity for dependence of all of these different drugs. When we originally wrote up the chapter, what I wanted to call it was marijuana, almost as addictive as caffeine. Take a look at the ratings they gave, basically 0 to 7. Okay? Cannabis was nowhere near amphetamine, alcohol, cocaine. Meth, Oxycontin, crack, the dreaded nicotine, or heroin. Where are those people out there turning to prostitution because of a cannabis habit? Where are those sweaty, disappointed, freaked out cannabis withdrawal patients? Right? The dependence isn't showing up. We finally found cannabis withdrawal. What are the symptoms? Loss of appetite. Really? Loss of appetite? Cannabis craving. Ooh, that sounds debilitating. And increased public awareness. Okay. We had the most boring movie ever, particularly if you're not high. Reefer Madness. And the burning question, which I know sounds like it ought to be about gonorrhea. But the notion was the love weed. Women cry for it, men die for it, right? And this was just part of the whole propaganda, if you will, about cannabis, right? In hopes of later passing laws against it. How did this happen? What was really motivating all of this? Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Who really smoked the egg? Who really smoked marijuana in the 30s? Nobody even knew what the hell it was. Nobody even had the word show up. All right? But in the 19-teens, early 20s, who's coming across the border to look for jobs? Mexicans. They eat that weird food. They work really hard and then they smoke that crazy, wacky tobacco. Anti-cannabis laws, where do they show up first? Texas, California, and of all places, Utah. Why Utah? Mormons are sending their sons down to Mexico to make more Mormons, right? Convert everybody. What does it say in those little gold plates that are in the Book of Mormon? No drinking coffee, no alcohol. But it doesn't say don't smoke pot. So here you are, you're an 18-year-old Mormon, knocking on people's doors, telling them about the Book of Mormon, and they say, sure, I'll read it, here, smoke this. And they say, oh, we can smoke this. It says right here, no coffee, no alcohol. They bring it back to Utah, and they are down with it. What do the fathers say? No, no, no. So Utah is one of the first states to have anti-cannabis laws as well. Right? But this was really more about controlling people than controlling cannabis. This is really about a way to bust Mexicans for being Mexicans. Right? And this constant racist, xenophobic theme is persistent in all of our drug laws. Before this, we had all the anti-opium laws against Chinese folks in California who were basically building the railroad. Okay? And what do we have now? Okay? If I'm in New York City buying pot on the street, I'm white and I'm old. I'm not going to get busted. Okay? But if your skin is darker than mine, if your Spanish is better than mine, you better watch out. Post-pot, ergo propter pot, another chicken and egg issue. A lot of times we get these mental illness arguments and it's, oh, so-and-so smoked pot first and then became mentally ill. Therefore, smoking pot made them mentally ill. Sorry guys, if you pull my finger and I fart, it's not because you pulled my finger, right? Just because something happens first doesn't make it a cause. It's not enough, right? Nevertheless, this just totally took everything by storm. Since the 1800s at least, we've had talk about this, and Moreau, even in the 1700s, said, there may be some kind of cannabis-induced mental illness. It's really not that marijuana causes mental illness, but a ton of mentally ill people smoke pot. Okay. Literally yesterday, I had a new study on this that I had to dispute. Paul Armentano wrote something for it for High Times and quoted me. Right? But people cannot let this go. Right? Now, literally half of the cannabis use among the mentally ill is self-medication. I'm depressed as hell, I'm anxious as hell, I'm a little bit psychotic, and what a surprise, cannabis makes things better, at least in the short term. And so I start smoking it. Later on, when they discover I'm mentally ill, they say, ooh, and you smoke pot too. Okay, but it's pull my finger. Education. A complicated set of arguments. But here on the left, we have American adults with high school diploma, GED, or less. Okay? Perfectly competent, wonderful adults who just happen to not get a lot of education. And 66.2% of them have never used marijuana. Most of them. On the right, we have American adults with at least 1 year of college education, including some of you, or more. A mere 52.4% of them have never used marijuana. Clearly, the way to get more education is to smoke pot. Isn't it the exact same argument we just had for mental illness? Ooh, so many mentally ill smoked pot. Well, so many college educated did too. Huh. Yet we seem to know this one isn't causal. Curious. Obviously, the key to graduation, this little green leaf. All right. Well, how informed were our first laws against marijuana? When was the Marijuana Tax Act?
1937.
1937, right? Okay. Think about what was going on then. Harry Anslinger headed this new Federal Bureau of Narcotics. He was a cop, and by the way, he was real big on alcohol prohibition, as were all his police friends. Alcohol prohibition is repealed. my job, and so are all my buddies. All my bust your ass for alcohol buddies. We need a new drug. We need a new scare. How about terrorism? Oh no, fuck, that's not gonna work. I got an idea. I hear down in Mexico there's this loco weed. Oh, a crazy plant and Mexicans? This is gonna fly for sure. They don't even speak fucking English. At the federal level, Mr. Snell says, what is this bill? Mr. Reaper says, it has something to do with something that is called marijuana with an H. Right? Because in 1937, nobody had to pronounce a J as an H in Spanish. So Spanish, different words for everything. Right? I believe it is a narcotic of some kind. Okay? The American Medical Association didn't even know to come to talk about this because they didn't know what the fuck marijuana was. They were dealing with cannabis. Who finally came forward to oppose this bill? The bird seed industry. Because those little cannabis seeds are good for birds. Okay? And what's the deal now? You have to sterilize them if you're going to put them in bird food. Other forms of data-based persuasion. So you guys are too young to remember Reagan. I went to high school with George Bush's nephew, Scott Bush, the first George Bush. George W.'s cousin, Scott. Right? Everybody loved Reagan in my high school. I was like, oh God, you guys. And Reagan always said really brilliant shit like this even before he was demented. I now have absolute proof that smoking even one marijuana cigarette is equal in brain damage to being on Bikini Island during an H-bomb blast. So not only did marijuana mess with your brain, it obviously made you radioactive. Right? This was presented as evidence. This was what we were supposed to believe in order to maintain cannabis prohibition, in order to keep the laws protecting us, saving us from ourselves, keeping us from eating raw cookie dough. Okay, in fact, what do we find? This is data from my own lab. Is there really brain damage? Are there really meaningful deficits in memory associated with smoking pot? Only if you believe it. Okay? My student Alison Luby told a bunch of stoners, hey, you're going to do this memory task, and stoners can't do it. Right? And the guys, of course, were like, okay, Addison, whatever you say, no, I can't do it. Right? And the women said, fuck you, bitch. And actually did better in that condition. My student Raina basically just had two conditions, no motivation and motivation. And she either said, hey, stoner, do this task, or hey, stoner, do this task so we can fight prohibition. And guess what? In the motivated condition, the users go way up, right? There's the screen line here, no motivation, whatever, I'll do it. As soon as she tells them, do this to help fight prohibition, they kick ass on the test. It's always in there. It's always in there. You can whip out that motivation anytime. If you can do it for this, you can do it for anything. Okay? Where were those first local ordinances? Like I said, California, Utah, Texas, Colorado, places where Mexicans were. And then other database persuasion. Here's really what was going on. I can't even read these aloud without wanting to punch myself in the face. The primary reason to outlaw marijuana is its effect on the degenerate races. Dun dun dun, brown people. Reefer makes darkies think they're as good as white men. Right? That's it? That's their aspiration, to be as good as white men? Surely they can dream a little bigger than that. Right? But this was the motivation. here's an opportunity to control people we want to control by taking one of their habits and making it illegal. Okay, Nixon, who was king of this shit. I mean, king. You have to face the fact the whole problem is really the blacks. The key is to devise a system that recognizes this, all while not appearing to. Okay? I want those little left-wing pinko faggots, but I don't know how to make that illegal. So I'll find something they like. What's that music? Fish? Oh, I can't make that illegal. Let's find something. I want a goddamn strong statement on marijuana. I mean one that just tears the ass out of them. You know, it's a funny thing. Every one of those bastards out there that are out for legalizing marijuana is Jewish. Think about it. Me, who's the head of Drug Policy Alliance? Ethan Nadelman. His dad was a rabbi. Who else works there? Marsha Rosenbaum. Coincidence? But the bottom line was, here is yet another veiled, racist strategy behind what essentially has become a drug war. But we're way past this now, right? This was the 60s, so we're so enlightened now. It's so much better. All right. In fact, who uses the most pot? White people. Because white people are fucking everywhere. Everywhere you go in the United States is fucking white people, white people, white people, everywhere. So of course, most of the marijuana smokers are white people. Because most of fucking everybody is white people in this country. Okay? However, who is arrested for possession in New York City? I'll give you a hint. It ain't the fucking white people. Alright? You see this little bitty white box? That's the white people. You see that great big black box? That's the black people. Alright? You think half of New York City is black people smoking pot? No. Alright? My friend Harry Levine gathered these data. It's been particularly bad since '97. I'm happy to see Cuomo has stopped some of the stop and frisk stuff, but I'm not optimistic about this. Okay. But this is wrong. Do I even need to say that? This is wrong, right? This is how racism creeps into all this. And when I talk to cops about this, they say, no, that's not it. At least white cops. They say, black people deal on the street. Hispanics sell pot on the street. White people go in the house to buy their pot. Coincidence? So is this a proxy for socioeconomic status? Okay, but let me just tell you, if you're buying pot, don't do it on the street. Okay? Is it just New York City? Well, here's literally every county in California. That little bitty red line is white marijuana possession arrays per 100,000 people. That really long black line, arrest rate for every 100,000 blacks. Okay? If you came down from Mars, you would think it's illegal to be black. You fucking would, right? I mean, just, ooh. How's it working here, Sherry Anslinger, when he was younger and I think posing for the Nazis or something? Well, let's see. As marijuana arrests have increased, they keep increasing. So almost every year there's more marijuana arrests than the year before. 4.9 million under Clinton, 6.4 under Bush. We had one final dip back down under 800,000 under Obama. I was pretty excited. But we're arresting more and more people for marijuana all the time. And let's see what's happened to cannabis use. Clearly, with all these arrests, everybody's like, well, hey, it's just not worth it. I can't buy pot. This would be just dangerous and ridiculous. No. So lifetime marijuana percent, just literally, have you used marijuana in your life? As arrests go up, so does the percentage of people who say, yeah, I use marijuana at least once. The diamonds there, did you use marijuana in the last year? Okay, only 10%, but clearly pretty steady. In 88 it was 9.8, now we're up to 10.3. So those arrests are clearly scaring people away. And the triangles here, used marijuana in the past month. Woohoo! Okay. Only 6% of the population uses marijuana that much, just so you know what a deviant you are. But I'm guessing you guys aren't all that afraid of a bust. How about the price per gram? And I couldn't get more recent data, but if you're buying less than 10 grams at a time, which is probably adaptive in this state, price has gone generally down. All right? Price. And what a surprise, if you're buying over 100 grams, which I do not recommend in this state, you're paying between $2 and $3 a gram. All right. Clearly, the idea that we're going to arrest our way out of this is ridiculous. These guys who jump up and down and say, we're going to cut it off at the source. Really? A weed that has been around since 8000 BC, we're going to cut off at the source? Really? A weed that is so prevalent that you can get it for $2 a gram, we're going to cut off at the source? And most importantly, THC content. And it's not crystal clear, but if you follow this, my student Mallory Laughlin just did a big correlation, but basically, the more arrests each year, the higher the average THC content in the following year. Okay? What's happening? The same thing we saw in alcohol prohibition. Right? Oh, alcohol's illegal. Am I going to go make a giant keg of beer that's hard to store and is a whopping 5% alcohol? Fuck a bunch of that. I'm going to make 100 proof whiskey by the barrel that's 50% alcohol and at least make it worth my while. Right? Now, is stronger pot more dangerous? Okay, probably not. How come?
You left
Smoke less. In the 70s, we would sit down and smoke 4 giant joints of a gram apiece and go, yeah, oh fuck, I'm high. Yeah, dude, this is a great night. This one-hit wonder pot they got now, right? 17% THC, blah, blah. Oh fuck, I gotta count lower than 1, right? How much of that can you possibly smoke? All right. Well, how much respiratory damage can one hit do? Not a lot. Okay? Life's too short to smoke bad pot. Every year, when the arrest records come out and it's higher than the year before, people are like, Mitch, Dr. Earleywine, for all the world out there in radio land, what do you say about these arrests? I say, next year's pot's going to be a doozy. Right? Why are we doing this to ourselves? It's horrible. It's ridiculous, right? We got cannabidiol. It'd be great. Takes the edge off the THC. Makes the pot not so fucking